You're watching Rebuild Project.
And this is my DIY bare bones version of what you would need to bend a piece of acrylic or plastic for your boat. Now, I didn't come up with this. I got this from, a few different versions I found on YouTube. But this is my cheap as it gets, repeatable, and so far reliable version. And all you really need is you need a base, which I'm using a 3/4 inch by 2 feet by 40 inch piece of plywood. And that's just so you can move this around. You need kind of a flat platform. I like using this melamine so far because it seems to cool the plastic down pretty quick. It doesn't want to transfer the heat as much as maybe regular plywood or MDF would. So this is just a shelf that I had. It's a 5/8 inch thick by, this was 8 feet, but I cut 3-foot sections out of it. I think it's 16 inch wide. I had 2 hinges in the garage, but basically I like these flat backed hinges because the hinge pin doesn't go below this little trough level here, which could affect the wire, which we'll get into. I took the one side of the melamine and I screwed it down to the base, and then I screwed the hinges into the other side, and this is the side that's going to bend the plastic or acrylic to whatever angle we want. I use this in conjunction with my angle finder, my digital one, to get the exact angle I want. But we're looking for 70-degree angles and 90-degree angles for ours today. And then the other pieces that are here are some brackets, some eye bolts with nuts, the wire that heats up. Now, a few things that I changed from the original is I used these little eye bolts to be able to adjust and make the wire a little bit more taut. And then I used a spring to be able to compensate for when the wire heats up. It wants to stretch and elongate, so the spring gives a bit of pressure and just takes that stretch, and then when it gets cold again it wants to contract. But what I did different than I've seen other people is I used some heat shrink. We don't want any of the wire that is going to get hot to touch any other metal parts, because that will make it inefficient, or it could close the circuit or screw up the circuit. So I used some heat shrink just past the hinges, and then I just used some silicone electrical tape. That's electrical tape that doesn't have a sticky back to it. It's just high temperature silicone, and that will insulate and isolate the hinges and this little metal trough from the wire, and that's important for a reason. Now, the trough itself is just some tile edging, 1/2 inch tile edging that I had kicking around from another job, but that's used not only to reflect the heat but also isolate the heat into a kind of a linear form here. Now, the things that I didn't have and that you'll need are a power supply. So this is a DC power supply, but they use this a lot in electronics and in the medical field. And all that does is it allows you to regulate the voltage and amperage and current. And over and above that, you're going to need this wire, and this is a special wire. It's called a nichrome 80, and what that refers to is the amount of ni or nickel and chrome in the wire, 80 being a percentage ratio. But it's the same wire that you would find in your hair dryer. Basically, much like a hair dryer, you plug it in the wall and it heats up this wire or element, and then in a hair dryer the fan pushes the the hot air out depending on, you know, how fast you want the hair dryer to go. This, you plug it into the wall, the same outlet, and you can control the voltage, the amperage, and the current that comes out of these, and it creates a circuit. Now, why that's important here is depending on the length of your wire, you're going to need more or less voltage, amperage, and current. My little bender here is basically made to accommodate a sheet of plastic that is the maximum 26 inches. That's why I made this 36 inches. And I can bend plastic anywhere below that. The ones I've seen on YouTube and some of the inspiration that I took to build this, they either have it really nicely wired in and you plug it in, or you do your clips on the outside so it doesn't interfere with the hinge. That's cool, but for what I need to do, I just want it cheap, repeatable, and I want it to be durable so that I can use it over and over again. I would suggest the only thing, my tidbit of advice for these DC chargers, now this one, Amazon, 70 bucks, but I specifically sought out one that was not necessarily the cheapest because there were cheaper ones, but that had the longer, thicker gauge leads with the alligator clips. These are 3 feet, and that only makes sense because I'm going to be putting one positive and one negative side. I want to be able to get it away from the plastic that I'm using. Now some of these leads are only, you know, 1.5 feet, and it just doesn't work. And the thickness, because we are going to be playing with the amperage and the voltage, want to be thick enough that it doesn't really heat up too much. But it's as simple as plugging it in, putting your plastic down, setting your voltage. Now, the farther the clips are away, the higher the voltage and amperage you're going to need to pass current through it. And the closer they are, the less you're going to need. And what I mean going to need is to get it up to a temperature around 180 to 200 degrees. That is a sweet spot for bending. Now, because of my little setup here, these hinges and the way it bends will not affect the clips until it gets to a certain point. But by that point, I can take off the clips. The piece of plexiglass acrylic will be hot enough as it is, and then I can just set it, forget it, until it cools down. There we go. So that's the whole gist of it. Simple, easy, but can it bend my piece of acrylic and turn it into an awesome console? We're gonna find out right now.